Recordings in progress, I've been just told by my computer.
Excellent. Now we have nothing left to say.
Yep, we've been talking for way too long already. You were right. I should have pressed record when we got on 25 minutes ago.
This is what I keep saying.
They missed all of that amazing off-topic discussion.
Well, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Julian's
Happy holiday.
Merry Christmas.
Happy Kwanzaa.
Oh dear. It's every year, Julian.
Yes. Did we all have a good Christmas?
We did.
Did we survive the massive tornado afterwards?
We did, thankfully. My husband's cousin lives on the Gold Coast and posted a couple of videos of trees just ripped up everywhere. So that was quite shocking.
Yeah, if we have any international listeners, which I don't think we do, or maybe we do, I have no idea. Yeah, there was a massive storm Christmas night that literally tore trees from the roots and unfortunately destroyed many people's Christmas decorations. So Merry Christmas.
You lost a few lights, didn't you?
Yeah, we had a few things blow out. Nothing major, nothing that can't be replaced. Luckily, it could have been a lot worse.
I was quite shocked to discover that the hail this year came spiked. It was spiky hail.
They've upgraded the hail this year.
That's a nice new fear to suddenly have to have. Spiky hail.
It's also the name of my heavy metal band. Spiky Hail.
Spiky hail. Oh my goodness. And that wasn't just Christmas, don't forget. It's been almost every single day for 2 weeks or something now.
Oh yeah.
Massive, massive storms.
We're
just
flicking
out of the blue.
Yeah, we're flicking currently from massive storms to heat wave back to massive storms. So
can't get enough of these massive storms.
Well, they're great storms. If you're going to have a storm, you may as well have it massive.
Yes.
I love
unprecedented. These unprecedented storms. It's almost like there's a pattern occurring.
What could
unprecedented things.
We've been using the word unprecedented so much the last 3 years. I think it no longer has any real meaning to anyone.
No, it's just become precedented.
Precedented storm. Well, welcome everyone to We're Not Helpful, a podcast about books, our opinions on books, what we've been reading, and all of the rantings in between.
You're getting good at that intro.
I think, yes, I'm getting everyone on
You've
topic.
been
I'm
practicing.
Eloise, who's with me today, as usual.
Julian is.
Hi. Brayton is.
Yeah, I'm here too. I'm always
That's
here.
not going to be confusing for anyone that you introduce each other. Brilliant.
We know who we are.
Well, look, we're episode 5. If you're not into the lore by now, you're not going to catch up.
It's too late. Don't go back.
It's too late.
So what are we talking about this week?
Well, I thought we would do a year in retrospective.
Now, when you say year in retrospect, you mean overall a what we've been reading retrospect, not a retrospect of our past episodes? Because I said to you, 4 is not enough for a retrospective.
Well, look, we could make it a really short episode.
Okay.
And just do a retrospective of the last 4 episodes. But no, I intended it to be a retrospective of the whole year. And, if we get time, we can talk about next year, what our plans are as well.
Excellent. So all of our what we've achieved this year in terms of our reading goals, any regrets, and what we are wanting to achieve for next year. But before we get into that, what have we been reading this week? Brayton, did you want to go first?
I'll go first because I do have something new. I have just finished a book called Flamegate Restless Shadows, written by Kate Mack. It is the first part in a duology. The second one is called Flamegate Into the Void. Now, the author of this is an independent author. I met her and picked up the 2 books at Supernova a couple of months ago.
Oh, yes, you picked up a lot of books.
I got a lot of books. It's on our Facebook page is the pile of books that I got.
Mm.
So it's the first part of a duology. Independent author. The book is heavy. If my one impression of it at first, it's a heavy book. I don't know what paper they used to print this on, but it's a heavy book.
Oh, physically heavy.
Physically heavy, yeah. Not like...
you mean emotionally heavy.
No, not emotional. Oh, maybe emotionally heavy. Let's see how the story progresses.
It doesn't look very big to be...
It's not. It is only just over 400 pages. It's 404 pages. But it's a hefty book. That's not a criticism of the book or anything. It's just my first impression, I picked it up like, oh, that's a heavy book.
I must buy this book.
Yeah, but no, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. Like, it's probably a mix of I don't know if anyone's ever read kind of like, it reminded me a lot of, there's a series I'm currently working through by V.E. Schwab called A Darker Shade of Magic, where it's essentially there's different parallel universes, and this is similar. So there's this guy, Phoenix Page, who, when he goes to sleep, essentially he wakes up in another universe.
Ooh,
So
that sounds cool.
yeah, so there's one universe where it's kind of, I don't want to say medieval because it feels like it's more Industrial Revolution era. And there's one where it's essentially the future. And in this future, there is this organization called Flamegate that is taking all this kind of void energy and using it for their own purposes. And Phoenix is caught in the middle of it all because he's the only one that can kind of traverse between these two universes. And yeah, so there's a mixture of kind of sci-fi, fantasy, and it's just, or at least I don't want to say, like, there's always this impression that like independent authors aren't as good. Like, they're all self-published and they're all just kind of couldn't get the traditional publishing route, which I don't want to make assumptions about any
I
of
think
that.
it's because that's a really difficult route to go down. And we live in such a different time now where self-publishing is far more prevalent and the way to get things done because it's easy.
Yes.
Like, you can print your own stories through Amazon now, I think.
Yeah, this book was actually printed by Amazon.
Yeah. That's probably where the heft comes from.
Probably. Yeah, but it was really good. Like,
Well,
it's
that's excellent.
yeah, I'm definitely going to read the second one. And I met
Annoyed
her.
with the storyline, actually, because I wrote a short story myself a short while ago, which was about what if your dreams are like parallel universe versions of yourself, and every time you die in a dream, that's because you've died in the parallel universe. And then I sort of morphed the story into someone was slipping between, every time she woke up, she had slipped into the next universe and was like, thought she was going crazy. Because no one would believe what her life was, and like things slowly started slipping away. Like her job changed and the people around her changed and her husband wasn't her husband anymore and that kind of thing. So
Yeah, but
good on her for getting to the story first.
Yeah, it's an interesting approach because like everyone that knows him, there's the kind of industrial fantasy land called Yonder, and everyone that he knows there knows that he's traversing into this other world. Like, it's not a mystery, and there's like a lot of really funny scenes because he'll just be pulled into the other world. Like, he can't control it, so he'll just go unconscious, and then they're like, oh god damn it, he's fallen into a river and we have to rescue him. And then we have to cart his unconscious body around until he comes back. So it's a really, there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek stuff like that, but it was really good. And I met the author at Supernova, and I'll leave a link to the book in the show description too, because I know I've been following her on social media, and she's been trying to get like, I think 200 books or something bought by the end of this year.
Oh, okay.
So maybe, I don't know, by the time I get this up, I don't know, but if it sounds interesting to you, go and support independent authors, because you never know what you're gonna, and that's why I like going to Supernova. Just, I'll go and buy random books from all the independent authors and meet them, and you never know when you'll get a hidden gem. And I really think, for me at least, this is one of them because I really liked it. And beautiful illustrations in it too, illustrated by, I think it's the author's sister, I think I read somewhere. But yeah, really nice illustrations throughout as well. So if it sounds interesting, pick this one up.
Love a good sci-fi.
Yeah, it's good. So I'm looking forward to reading the second one.
Excellent. Julian, what have you been reading?
I have been reading a book called The Scarecrow.
What's that one
by
about?
Michael Connolly. It is, I guess you would call it a soft sequel to a book that he wrote about nearly 20 years ago now, called The Poet. Actually, over 20 years ago. It's about a serial killer. So The Poet was about a serial killer. If you've ever read any Michael Connolly books, his books very much share. It's a shared universe. So all his characters in his books exist within the one sort of universe, and sometimes there are intertwinings. And so this one is about an investigative journalist, a crime journalist named Jack McAvoy, Um, and about 11 or 12 years before this book takes place, he was involved in a serial killer case that went by the name of the Poet. And he actually was kidnapped by this serial killer and managed to survive by pure luck, basically, and happenstance. And 11 or 12 years later, he's coming to the end of his journalistic career. He's just been laid off by the Los Angeles Times and all the budget cuts. And for his last story, he receives a phone call from this woman claiming that her son or grandson who has been arrested for a murder is actually innocent of the murder. And so he does a bit of poking around. And at the same time, he's training up his replacement. So he's being replaced by a young up-and-coming woman who is going to take over the crime beat when he is laid off. And so they're looking into the murder and how it happened. And she is investigating sort of the history of the victim while he's investigating the supposed suspect who is now in jail for a false confession. And she actually sets off the serial killer's trigger on the internet, basically, and at the same time finds a case set in another state that has very similar aspects to it. So Jack McAvoy goes off and investigates that other killing, and it turns out it looks like by the same killer, but in the same time, the killer is now aware that he's onto him because of the trap that he set up on the internet, and it's sort of going from there. So now he's the target of another serial killer.
Oh, no. Did the poet get caught, or is that too much of a spoiler?
It's a bit of a spoiler because that leads into another book that he wrote about a different character and so on down the line. So I won't go into the details of the poet. Wonderful book, crime novel, great book, great twist at the end. So I definitely recommend reading that. But this one, I'm only about halfway through at the moment. But his partner in crime, well, his other investigative journalist that he is training up, has been caught by the serial killer and killed by him. That's not a spoiler. That happens about a quarter of the way into the book. And the serial killer is trying to set him up for the murder and then make it look like Jack then goes on to kill himself. And so that's kind of where I'm at the moment. The FBI is now aware of this because he has a friend in the FBI who he called. They're now aware of it, and then it's all kind of going into the sort of rising action climax of the story where they try and find the killer before he kills the journalist, Jack McAvoy. So it's quite a good book, bit of a slow start. And if you haven't read The Poet, you might be a bit lost to start with. And there's another sort of series of books he writes about an investigator, a police officer by the name of Harry Bosch. And they're kind of entwined a little bit. So if you haven't read some of his other work, you might be a bit lost as to who these characters are, because a lot of them are from previous novels that he's written. But at the same time, the story is not dependent on having read that. So you could potentially pick this up and follow the thread fairly easily.
So how many of his books have you read before, or is this the first one?
No, I've read, like I said, I read The Poet. A friend from high school when I was in grade 11 or 12 actually put me onto it. It was one of the first real adult novels that wasn't a Stephen King or Dean Koontz that I read, and I really enjoyed it. And so I read a couple more of his, one of the Harry Bosch series I read, and The Lincoln Lawyer, which became a movie with Matthew McConaughey, and I believe it's now a series on Netflix.
Is that him? He wrote the book that it was based on.
Yeah. So, and again, a great book. I haven't seen the movie or the series, but the book is essentially about this lawyer who his office is a Lincoln Town Car, and it is being driven by a former client who is driving him around to pay off his debt because he couldn't afford to pay for the services of said lawyer. So they're all very much intertwined. And Jack McAvoy actually wrote the story about the Lincoln Lawyer in the paper as well. So everything's very intertwined. But each story is somewhat separate as well, so you should be able to pick up the threads. It's crime. It's not a heavily emotional book. You know who the killer is because you read a chapter from Jack McAvoy's point of view, and then a chapter from the killer's point of view, and then it kind of swaps as the book goes. So you do know who the killer is. It's more of a, will he catch the killer before he strikes again or before he manages to kill
Cat and mouse kind of.
him. Or that kind of thing. Yeah, it's a cat and mouse sort of a thing as well. And it's good. It's exciting. It's fun. It's a nice, easy read as well. It's not bogged down in a lot of. It's not very wordy or anything like that. So it's a nice bit of fun to kind of finish off the year on.
Excellent. I love a good crime novel.
I have not read many crime novels. Maybe I should give one a go.
I've got 2 comedy novels actually on my list of to be read, written by an Australian comedian. I'm just gonna.
I'm assuming you're still working your way through Moby Dick.
Oh, all right.
You regret picking that book, don't you?
I really do. Let me sing you the song about Moby Dick. I don't know what's going on.
Well, there's a whale.
No, there's not even a whale yet. There's
Oh my goodness.
I haven't gotten anywhere to the whale. He's just spent an entire chapter describing what whales are and what categories they fit into. Turns out whales are fishes, guys.
But they're not. Whales aren't fishes.
They clearly didn't know that back then. I don't know.
So you're
Yes.
you're reading this book because you wanted to read a classic, is that correct?
Yeah, I did. I made a mistake.
But you read Dracula and you've read Frankenstein,
Yeah.
haven't you?
Those are both classics. They count.
Well, I started reading Dracula before I made the list, so I felt like it didn't count.
Well, I think it very much counts.
It totally counts.
I'm a quarter of the way through. I am determined to see this through.
Watch the Gregory Peck movie instead and say you did.
No, I'll watch the one with Patrick Stewart in it. And I will at some point. I don't know. And then I'll look and I'll go, see, all of that could have been all of this could have been cut out of the book. You didn't need all of this.
All right. Well, when we do our 2024 retrospective, we'll catch up on you and see how you're going with that.
Because one of my other number 34 on my 40 before 40 list, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back to episode 1 where I explain that. Number 34 is to finish all of the books in my to read pile. So I have to finish Moby Dick so I can get to my to read pile, which admittedly is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 books long now because I added 4 at Christmas.
That's pretty short compared to mine, to be honest.
You know what? I'm not going to count the books I got at Christmas because I feel like adding to the pile is not fair to my challenge. So I'm just going to read the books before my 40th that were in my to read pile before, like when I made the list, and the newly added books don't count. But going back to my point, I picked up Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone so that I could read it before.
Okay, but what book did you get?
You should tell the police. That's quite a crime.
By Benjamin Stevenson. Because I saw Everyone on This Train as a suspect, and I thought, oh, I wonder if Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone, like that's the first book he wrote, and I wasn't sure if it was actually like a prequel to the Train one.
Yeah.
So I thought I would quickly pick this one up and read it before I read this one, because I got the Train, Everyone on This Train as a Suspect as a Christmas gift. And Benjamin Stevenson, he's apparently an Australian comedian, and these books are like funny crime. So I'm like, yes, excellent, up my alley. I will read those at some point.
Are you the type of person that has to finish the book you're reading before you start another one? Yeah, I'm exactly the same.
I'm very ADHD. I need to finish. I can't read 2 books at once. I have tried that in the past, and it didn't end well because I couldn't keep the story straight. I find it very... I'm very envious of people who can read multiple books at the same time. But it's also like, it's because it's time consuming. Like, where do I find the time to read when, you know, you're working, you've got a family, you've got extracurricular activities that you're doing. There's stuff on television you want to watch.
Yeah.
So it's hard.
And clearly you need to ignore your family.
I need to ignore my family more. Okay, right. Yeah. That'll be mine.
It's almost like if you start a second book, the author's gonna message you or something and go, "Why aren't you 100% focused on my book?"
No, it's not that. Like I've not it's not that. It's just I want to focus on the book that I'm reading because I feel like I'm not going to focus on the next book if I'm reading them both at the same time.
Yeah.
So yes, I will try to devote a bit more time and energy to Moby Dick. I think my problem is that I'm trying to read it at night before I go to bed, and it's like my eyes are it's putting me to sleep. It's probably good that I'm reading it at night so that I can go to sleep because I don't sleep very
It's probably
sometimes.
not what you want from a book sometimes, though.
No, especially when you're trying to pay attention to it. And like it's very descriptive and it's very metaphorical, but like nothing has anything to do with anything in a lot of the tiny chapters. So I'm not it's hard.
Didn't we talk about a few weeks ago how this was in the time period when they were paid by the word or something?
Oh, I don't think if we talked about that, but that
No.
probably has something to do with it. Yeah, so I'm hoping it will pick up once they actually start hunting the great white whale.
Yeah. Just flick it. I was going to say, if it gets too bad, just do the audiobook.
Yeah, I don't know. I find it very difficult to listen to audiobooks because I feel like I'm not paying attention. Like I prefer podcasts to listen to. But yeah, I don't know. But we'll get into audiobooks because that will be part of our topic today in terms of our year in retrospect and our goals for next year.
Perfect segue.
Thank you. I'm very good at this now.
All right, year in retrospective. Should we start off talking about, I don't know, do we want to talk about the best books we read or the worst ones to start with?
I don't feel like I've read enough books this year to categorize them like that, personally.
All right,
I don't think I could either, unless I count Moby Dick.
Well, I definitely. Well, I think you've made your feelings about Moby Dick perfectly clear. Best book ever. You're like, sorry,
5 stars.
Yeah, you just reminded me of my mum when the Hugh Jackman Les Mis movie was coming out. She decided she was going to read Les Miserables before the movie came out.
No, don't do that. Even I know.
It was she said it was a struggle, but she did it. But God, it was a struggle.
What did she say about it in the end?
She said ultimately she liked it,
okay,
but she could understand why they cut so much out.
Why they made it into a musical?
Yeah, like there's the whole, I don't know, spoilers for Les Miserables if no one has ever read or seen that.
You've got to get so many complaints.
I know. There's the bishop at the start who is literally in the story for, I don't know, 1 or 2 scenes in the movies.
2 songs.
Yeah. There's a whole 100-page chapter in the book about his whole backstory and everything like that really serves no relevance to anything except to say, hey, this guy's a good person.
Which you could say in one sentence.
I just did. I'm a better writer than Victor Hugo. There we go.
Why are you not published yet, Brayton?
Yeah, because I haven't written a book. That might be why I'm not published.
That explains it.
Well, come on. Hurry up then.
All right. Sorry. I'll get onto that. Okay. Well, I can talk because as we discussed.
Yay!
I know English. As we discussed, I went through my Goodreads list, which I used to track everything. And out of this year, I read 57 books.
That's so many.
That's a lot. Now, I am including things like, yeah, that's fair. And I'm pretty certain that's not going to change in the next 3 days. I don't think I'm going to be able to finish the current book I'm reading before the new year.
Not with that attitude.
Well, come on.
Well, I could, but like we have discussed, we all have families and responsibilities.
I feel like we just said ignore your family.
Yeah,
so
I know.
Continue reading.
That was the plan that we had just discussed.
Yes. So I am including not only books, I am also including audiobooks and comics and things like that. Now, when I say comics, I don't mean like a 20-page issue. Like I buy the big, thick collectors.
Like the graphic novels.
Yeah, graphic novels or manga or things like that. I am 100% including those in my reading list. So like Chainsaw Man takes up 11 of those spots because I've bought the first 11 volumes of Chainsaw Man and read them.
Is manga not considered graphic novel? Are they 2 separate categories, or is it a form of graphic novel?
Ooh, I'd have to look up the meaning of it, but I
Yeah,
think
I
it's its
consider
own
them
art
different.
style.
Yeah, if it's Japanese, I consider it manga, and I think it's different to something like, well, another
Like a
graphic
Frank, it's
novel.
different to a Frank Miller or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Mm.
like another graphic novel. Well, a graphic novel I started reading this year was the Sandman
Ooh,
series
yes.
by Neil Gaiman, which is,
Mm.
jumping off from the Netflix show, which I ordered the third volume of that. It's on its way now.
You can just borrow ours. We've got 6.
I like owning them.
Oh, okay.
They look good on my shelf.
That's true. You look good.
Yeah, but I consider manga and kind of the Western graphic novels separate categories. That's just me.
Sorry, Julian's
I
just
think
going.
Eloise is planning to kidnap you.
I was trying to be funny, and Brayton just rolled right over the top of it.
Yeah, that's what I do. It's what I
Sorry.
do best. I had a train of thought. I had tunnel vision. All right, so if I'm going through my whole list here, should I start? Do you want me to start top of the list or bottom of the list?
Alphabetically, of course.
Alphabetically? Okay.
Do you mean in terms of
Like best to worst.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I don't have a ranking of all 57, but I can definitely pinpoint a couple of really good ones and
Let
a
me
couple
just
of.
pick out a couple from the top and the bottom.
All right. So starting from the bottom, I will start with one here that I thought I would really like, but did end up being a little in my opinion, was Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy.
Never heard of it.
No, Julian, do you know Cormac McCarthy?
The name sounds familiar.
He
So does
wrote
Blood
The
Meridian.
Road, which was turned into the Viggo Mortensen film.
Of course, yeah, yeah.
Ah,
Yeah. And he only passed away a few months ago, actually.
Great novel, apparently, The Road, by the way.
Yes, I've heard.
Mm.
Now, I listened to Blood Meridian, and so I listened to the audiobook, and I think that was honestly the wrong approach for that kind of book. And I think that's why it didn't land for me as much. It feels much more like a book that needs to be absorbed slowly.
I understand it's quite intense.
Yes, it definitely
quite
is.
deep.
To summarize it, it's essentially a Western. And it's about this guy that is kind of recruited for this expedition into Mexico, I believe it is, and the trials and tribulations and all the really bad things that befall him and his crew. And I think, yeah, the two things that really didn't make it land for me was that, one, I listened to the audiobook, and like I said, I think this is a kind of book that you need to kind of absorb slowly as you're reading it. And not rushing through it, but listening through it in the audiobook when you don't have that time, really, I do think you actually are missing out on something. And the second thing is just at the time in my life, when I read that book, I think it was just the wrong book for me at that point in my life. I needed something happier, and that book is really depressing.
I think that's actually a really good point as well, Brayton. Like books, we pick up a book sometimes, and it's no slight on the author, but sometimes you're just not in the right place to read a book, and it's not a slight on how good or bad the novel itself is.
No.
It's just not the right one for you at that time.
Like objectively, it is a very good book. It is a very good book, and I think if I was in a different headspace at a different time in life, I would have really loved this. But for me, at that point in my life, it just didn't hit for me. But it is. I am intending to reread it again in the future.
how many books have you reread over time? Not even just this year, but just over time.
Honestly, not a lot. Because for some reason, rereading books doesn't do it for me. I always feel like I need to read something new. Now, I have reread a few Matthew Riley books in the past because they are very easy reads. And if I just need something a bit more quick and pulpy, I'll whip out one of his and read that. But it's
like
been
a bit of a
while.
comfort book.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly right. So, but it's been a while since I've reread it. But Blood Meridian, I really feel like I want to reread it at some point and see if I react differently to it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say you really need to be in the headspace to read a particular book if it's got certain themes in it. And I think that's so important.
Mm.
That you do choose those types of things carefully. So would you say that did it make things at the time worse perhaps, or did you like kind of realize, yeah, maybe I should have put this book down a lot earlier than trying to finish it?
Yeah, I think it's the only book through the year that I really got halfway through it and kind of went, I don't know if I want to continue this right now. But like you with your Moby Dick, I pushed through. It was my white whale, so to speak.
Yes.
I pushed through it and I got to the end. And yeah, it didn't make things worse at the time, at that point. Like, I'm not going to go into details of what was going on in my life at that point. But I just think it was the wrong book at the wrong time.
Yeah. I think we've all read those types of books.
Yes.
Yes.
Now to pick one from the top of my list. This one is also an audiobook. I'm just looking through my list here of which ones that really made an impact on me. And I think you two would really like this if you haven't already. As You Wish, Inconceivable Tales from the Making of the Princess Bride.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
Yes. And
I've heard of this.
Is it like behind the scenes type book?
Yes. Yes. It's Carrie Elwes's memoirs of the making of the Princess Bride.
Oh, can I borrow it from you? Oh, wait, you said it was an audio book.
If you're going to read this, get the audio book because
because it's him.
Carrie Elwes narrates it himself. Plus, there are guest narrations from some of the cast and crew.
That sounds
like
so exciting.
Billy Crystal, Carol Kane, Rob Reiner.
Mandy Patinkin?
No.
Oh,
it's someone else reading Mandy Patinkin's parts.
Oh, that's a shame.
But it is like, seriously, the making of that movie seems so wholesome.
Oh,
and everyone seemed to have so much fun on that I was sad when that audiobook ended.
Aww.
Like, I got to the last chapter, I'm like, no, I want more. I want Carrie Elwes to continue narrating everything from now on.
Do you ever like listen to something where there's a particular voice of someone and then all of a sudden when you're, say, reading something, it's their voice that you're hearing in their head, even though it has nothing to do with the book that you're reading?
Oh, absolutely. Especially if a character reminds me of another character in a movie or something like that, I'll kind of insert that person into that role. So yeah, Carrie, As You Wish, Carrie Elwes' memoirs are amazing, especially because you get that real behind the scenes look of like how he got the role and what the process was like. And especially it's a whole chapter just dedicated to the sword fight that he does with Inigo Montoya. And
he was a relative unknown, but a bit of a serious actor at that point. Yeah, and they didn't think that he would be able to pull off the comedy, but then came in so naturally and they went, oh, well, who else could play this role?
Well, I don't want to spoil things. Well, I don't know if you can spoil this type of book. Well, it's very early on in the thing. He did the audition in his hotel room. He was filming another movie or something at the time, and Rob Reiner and the producer, I think, came out and wanted to meet with Carrie. They'd heard his name through somewhere, and they thought that he had the right look for Wesley. And Carrie Elwes was excited about it because he had actually read the book himself and was a big fan of the book. And they gave him, I think, a monologue. I can't remember which part of the script it was, but they gave him a page from the script and just asked him to read through it. And he read it. And I think, if I remember correctly, they asked him to stop halfway through the monologue. And he thought like, oh, I've done a bad job. But actually they're like, nope, you're perfect. You got it. Like, we don't need to hear anymore.
Have you guys read the book?
I haven't read the book, no.
It's
yes, I have.
Yeah, the book is very, very good. I've got like the 25th anniversary edition, which has some extra stuff in it apparently. And it is actually disappointing how much is cut out of the book when it's put to film. Like, I love that film. Like, it's one of my favorite films. The adaptation, I think, does a good job of adapting what they could in the time period that it was made. Because when was it? Was the 80s, early 90s?
87, I think it was made.
Okay, late 80s.
Which for an 80s movie, it holds up really well even today. Like, you couldn't tell it was made a coming up to 40 years ago.
Well, because there's not
Well,
like a lot of
it's not
special
time
effects.
specific though.
Yeah.
Like it's a fantasy film, but there's no like real green screen kind of special effects.
It's all practical.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the ROUSs are a bit janky now, but I think that's kind of the charm.
The stories
really.
he tells about filming those scenes are so good.
Uh,
I'm not going to
I've
spoil.
heard, yeah.
I'm not
I
going to spoil
will-
anything, but
I
yeah.
will say, like, my favorite part about Carrie Elwes as an actor is in the forest with the lightning sand. And when Buttercup gets sinks into the sand, like, immediately. And the way Carrie Elwes, his face with the micro expressions of going from what just happened, oh my God, fear, like absolute horror in that split second. Oh God, it makes my heart ache because of he just portrays how much his character loves Buttercup so well in what is essentially 1 second of acting. And I will crow about that until the cows come home because I just love it so much. And I love him. And he's just so handsome. Sorry, I'm going.
I
And
believe
then
this
he
was a
did
rant that
say
I
it again.
heard from you about 2 months after I first met you.
Really?
Might have even been less time than that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, okay.
And then Carrie Elwes went and did the Saw series.
I know. I ranted like that to you a month after I met you. How are we still friends after all this time?
Because I think I agreed with you.
Okay.
Oh, Carrie Elwes, like, I don't know if you call him an underrated actor, but he seems like he should be bigger than he is.
Yeah, he's really not done huge amounts when you think about it.
He'll just pop up every now and then in something. You're like, oh,
like,
Carrie
Carrie
Elwes.
Elwes.
Yeah, but especially for you two, I think seek out especially the audiobook because it's so good. And hearing Carrie Elwes talk about it, like you can feel the passion that they all had for this movie and still do. Like they talk they're so
Fondly?
honored to have been a part of it and they're so appreciative of the fandom that this movie still has.
Please tell me he tells stories about Andre the Giant's drinking.
Oh, yes, so many stories.
Just
and-
how he would just like drink everyone under the table.
There's a
Because he-
great
drinking
story
twice
where
six-pack.
he
Oh my
drank
God.
so much and just fell asleep in the middle of a hotel lobby. But he's so big, no one could move him. So
No.
they just left him there in the hotel lobby. And it's so like not to spoil anything, but there's a moment towards the end of the book when he talks about when he heard of Andre the Giant's passing. And he said he was actually filming Robin Hood Men in Tights at the time when he heard.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he said he was filming a Mel Brooks comedy at the time, which could only be Robin Hood Men in Tights. And it's so sad because he just says, I didn't something along the lines of I didn't feel very funny that day.
No. How could
And it's
you?
just like, oh my gosh, that's such a heartbreaking thing to say. So yeah, if there's any book that has like really made an impact on me, it's definitely that one for this year. It's such a great book, and I've listened to the audiobook because it's such a great experience.
Well, I don't have Audible, but I might have to actually just purchase an Audible subscription now specifically to listen to that.
They
book.
give you a
You
free
can
book
bundle
if
it
you're a
in
new
with Prime
customer.
if you have Prime.
Oh, I've got Prime. Excellent. I'll do that then.
Or Spotify have audiobooks on there now.
Oh, okay. Shall I go next about what I've my year in retrospect?
Sure, sorry, I talked for a long time.
No, that's all right. Well,
Well, you did read 57 books.
I did.
Yeah,
You
I've
did
got
read-
I've
you
another.
read more than both of us put together. I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure.
and I've still got dozens to talk about. So hurry up.
Well, out of this year, 4 of the books that I have read are all Tolkien textbooks, essentially. So I have read, and they were big books. I've read The Fall of Numenor. I have read The Nature of Middle-earth, which is the most complicated Tolkien textbook I have ever read and will never read again because it was very dry. The Unfinished Tales of Numenor and Middle-earth, and The Fall of Gondolin. So basically, ask me anything. I know all about Tolkien mythology. I don't actually. Like, there's just so much of it that I do forget half the time. Like,
You could totally go toe to toe with Stephen Colbert.
oh, I don't know. He knows a lot. He's very good. I would love to do one of those drunk history episodes where I get really drunk and then try and explain the history of Middle-earth.
I mean, like,
I would like to see that.
we could make that happen.
We could do like a
Patreon
live
exclusive.
stream or something. Like on a YouTube video or something. Sometime next year.
Yeah,
we'll do that.
we can make that happen.
Apart from those 4 incredibly thick textbooks, the only other things I've read this year was Dracula and then going into Moby Dick. So 90% of my reading this year is
Okay,
Tolkien.
So I'll ask, out of those 4 books, if you're
Yeah.
a Tolkien fan, say you've read Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and you want more, which one would you go for out of those 4 you've read?
Okay, so not discounting the Silmarillion, which I have read a couple of times, which I think is important. These actually do expand on the Silmarillion, so it gives you a far greater look at those stories included in the Silmarillion. And if you really wanted to go with something, I would say The Fall of Gondolin is my favorite out of all of them.
But these books are definitely not, they don't sound like they're for the casual Lord of the
No,
Rings fan.
They are not your casual. Do not expect a linear story from start to finish, because Tolkien's writings were very sporadic for his like his first and second age stories. So he wrote a lot of stuff that was unfinished, hence Unfinished Tales. And Christopher Tolkien, who pulled most of these books together, was very much, he was not a novelist himself. He did not complete his father's stories. All he did was pull his father's writings together and then commented on them. The one I hated the most, which I read a couple of years ago, was the history of Beren and Luthien, which I was wanting the story of Beren and Luthien from start to finish. Tolkien never wrote the story from start to finish. He wrote parts of it, and then he would write descriptions about what was going on, and then he would write a historical timeline, but he never actually wrote the fictional story from start to finish.
So there's a version of that story in the Silmarillion, isn't there?
There is a version in the Silmarillion, which is the canon version. The Beren and Luthien book that you can get has the 3 separate versions. One is a lay, so a poem, and it's an unfinished poem. It's beautiful writing, I have to say. Like, his writing is beautiful. It's so evocative, and like, it just brings so much imagery to mind. He was very, very clever in his writing. Like, he was a wordsmith, essentially. But they're all unfinished. And basically, Christopher Tolkien just put them in the books, commented on them, and then sort of said where they changed and why they changed. But he never brought anything together, and he never finished anything. And specifically, one of the versions is before Sauron was a developed character, he was in fact a gigantic house cat. And when I say gigantic, I mean the size of a lion, but a house cat. So you can understand why that didn't get published.
And Peter Jackson is a coward for not portraying him that way.
He should have made him a gigantic
That's
cat.
it. I said it. Controversial opinion, but I stand by it.
Fight Brayton in the comments.
Peter Jackson wants to come on here and defend himself.
Yes.
Feel free.
Oh, yeah. So I do like The Fall of Gondolin. I do like The Fall of Numenor. Like, it really does describe exactly what Numenor was and what happened and why it all happened. And it gives you different descriptions of all of the kings and queens over time. And there's some really compelling stories in there. But again, they feel very like they end abruptly because Tolkien didn't finish those stories. So it's kind of sad. And it's like, you almost want someone to come in and finish them, but like, who would have the chops to do it? I don't know. Like, no one really. He's the father of fantasy, and I think no one would be able to touch it and really finish it off with a gratifying finish, essentially. Like all you can do is piece it together and kind of see from his his notes about where it all then went. So that was my year. You, Julian, you were yelling nerd out to Brayton before. I'm surprised you haven't already yelled out nerd to me.
It doesn't need to be said, clearly.
Missed opportunity.
So that's my year in retrospect. Julian, what have you been up to in terms of your reading this year?
Good question. I'm actually trying to piece together what I've read this year versus what I may have read last year that I think was this year.
Years have bled into each other the last 3 years.
Now I know I read Fahrenheit 451 this year. So I had to teach it. And so that was the surprise standout for me really this year was Fahrenheit 451. I can tell you I didn't read The Great Gatsby again.
Clearly next year
I'm very disappointed that
we need to do a reading club and just make it The Great Gatsby. I think we should transition into a Great Gatsby only podcast next year.
Oh, I could talk for hours on The Great Gatsby. In fact, when I mentioned to my family that I went on a rant in our last podcast, they asked me why, which gave me the opportunity to go on another rant about it.
All right, I am totally in for if we ever get popular enough to do a Patreon, I want to do a special where it's just Julian ranting about The Great Gatsby.
Admittedly, we only had positive comments in the comments on that one, with people agreeing with you. So there wasn't much.
I wasn't wrong.
I'm sure there's a Great Gatsby defender out there that was willing to come on.
There's still
I'm
time.
sure there are.
Fight us in the comments.
So I read Fahrenheit 451. I've read a number of short stories because I was teaching a short story unit, but nothing really worthy of mention. Honestly, I started reading a few books but didn't finish for various reasons. I started reading Fairy Tale by Stephen King. It's one of his latest books, but like you were saying, Brayden, right time, wrong time, and it was kind of the wrong time for that. I was gifted a book last year by my family-in-law, a Tom Clancy novel that I kind of started reading, but it just didn't grab me, and I've actually since found out it's not a Tom Clancy novel. It is a novel about Jack Ryan. Jack Ryan? Yeah.
Jack Ryan?
But written Jack Ryan.
Yep.
Yeah. But anyway, written by someone after Tom Clancy's death, based on his story ideas and stuff like that. So I sort of put that one aside. I reread a novel by Nick Earls, Zigzag Street. We were talking a little bit about comfort novels earlier before, and that's one of the ones that I like to read, because no matter how I feel life is going for me personally, it's not as chaotic as the main character in Zigzag Street's life. I think that's wonderful. I read Phantoms by Dean Koontz, which, as you know, I was struggling through for about 4 weeks there.
Yep.
I tried reading In Cold Blood, but I had to put it down. And I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast or if I mentioned it to Mel the other week when she may have asked why I stopped. But I found that the almost deification of the victims really kind of led to I'm not really interested in this story anymore, because it didn't feel realistic. I know maybe it's because, in the 60s families were portrayed, all their failings were very private.
That was the Truman book you were reading, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I was going to ask
and so
that one or not.
Yeah, maybe I will eventually. But the take on the family was that they were this beautiful, pious, wonderful, faultless family who suffered a great tragedy, and they did suffer a great tragedy, obviously. But I can't wrap my head around the idea that a family is that altruistic, is that good, without some, downsides to them. Every family has their struggles as well as their good moments. So I put that to the side. I started listening to The Picture of Dorian Gray on Audible.
Oh, really?
I did, and it's a really interesting start. But I think I may have mentioned this to you guys at one point that I was in the car listening to it, and I went from where I started my journey to where I finished my journey, and I realized about 20 minutes or so of the book I didn't even hear. I just zoned out
Yeah, you
as I
weren't
was
paying attention.
driving.
Yeah. I have
Um,
that issue with
so I
audiobooks
felt
too.
that might be one that I come back to in print as
Mm.
opposed to an audio
Yeah.
book.
I
And it's-
have read it,
Um,
and it's a
Yeah, I've
very
read it too.
easy read because it's fairly short,
Hmm.
and I find it so outrageous that no one has ever made a good movie adaptation of it. When you could easily do a good movie adaptation, and then for whatever reason, the ones that we have
Yeah.
got are just awful.
And like it's a really interesting story, and it's unfortunate that I zoned out while I was driving, as I have a tendency to get lost in my own thoughts when I drive.
Mm.
So maybe audiobooks while I'm driving is not the best idea. And then the non-fiction book rating that you actually put me onto by Bart Ehrman.
Ah, yes.
I think it was How
So-
Jesus Became God.
Yes.
And that was really interesting because a lot of that meshes with a lot of the stuff that I watch from Dan McClellan on YouTube
Yeah.
when it looks into the academic research of the historical Jesus and how Christianity sprung up from his followers. That was a really interesting book to listen to.
He's a very
As well.
good researcher and YouTuber. His videos are just perfect. Like he's
Dan
really
McClellan,
good.
yeah.
Yeah, he's really good at calmly explaining arguments and why
Yeah.
people are wrong, essentially.
Without being condescending about it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Which is very
He will
important.
sometimes get a bit angry and be like, listen here, you stupid dickhead.
I think it's more when
Yeah,
he's been
stop.
I think it's more when his professionalism is called out.
Yeah.
He does get annoyed. Like I think I showed you the video he did defending Bart Ehrman's work. And someone called him out on that, and he was like, "No, you did exactly what I said you would do in defending yourself here,
Yeah.
and you didn't actually answer any of the things I said."
Hmm.
So he got quite defensive there, but he also gets very defensive and quite angry when people use certain biblical passages by saying this is what it means, and those passages are then used to deny rights to already underprivileged members of
Yeah.
society.
Yes.
When no, the Bible wasn't saying that
Yeah.
because the Bible was written 2,000 years before you're making your current argument. So don't try and fit your own identity beliefs into here.
Yeah.
He is coming out with a novel a book next year too, by the way.
So that'll be on your
so
to read list.
that will be on my reading list for next year, definitely.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I'll-
speaking of next year,
Yep.
what are our goals for next year then in terms of reading?
Oh, I have one.
Oh,
Ooh,
good.
excellent.
Go.
So I have been, as Brayton, you would know, I have been watching the series Reacher on Prime, and it
Yep.
really captured me. It's a great series. If you haven't seen it, go and watch it. It's again not deep or meaningful, but it's a lot of fun.
What was it
Good
described
And
as?
all the
Dad,
actors-
dad TV or something?
It's bad TV. I've heard it described that.
And
But
I
it
think
is a lot
I
of
think
fun.
I said to you, I love how they just shoehorn a fist fight into every episode for no reason.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
should start watching it then. I love a good nonsensical fist
And
fight.
every time the character meets up with someone at some point in the show, they will say, "Were you good or did you punch someone?" And obviously, he's punched someone.
I punched.
Yeah, and of course,
He's never
the
ashamed
whole
about
cast
it. He
looks
just
like
tells
they're
it
having a
so
great
matter of
time.
factly.
No, I punched him. He misbehaved, so I punched
Okay.
him. But of course, the Reacher series is based on the Lee Child novels, and so I thought I'm going to give them a go because they seem like they would just be a fun read.
I'm
So
surprised
that
you
is my
haven't read
plan
them
to at least.
before.
No, I haven't. I think mostly because someone tends to gift me a book, or Stephen King comes out with his, triannual book that I want to read before I do anything
Not a lamp.
else.
The spooky lamp.
Is
Ah.
Stephen King, like, as soon as a Stephen King book is out, you're immediately on it?
I used to be that way. In fact, that was one of the books that I did read this year. Was a short story compendium of his called "If It Bleeds," which is really interesting because one of the short stories in that is all about a character who is in 4 of his novels and now in a 5th novel that just came out. So
Is that Holly? Is that the new one?
Holly Gibney, yeah. And so
Yeah.
if she also appears in the TV series Mr. Mercedes and in the TV show The Outsider, both based on novels. Completely different characters, completely different actors, not related in any way, which has frustrated a lot of the Stephen King fans because if you're creating these shows, why wouldn't you just have that kind of interwoven thing? But not so much anymore. I don't like Holly came out, I think, 2 months ago. I haven't read it. Not that I'm going off Stephen King, but I'm just finding sometimes his books are a little bit too serious for me when I'm in certain frames of mind. Hence the Michael Connelly, the Picture of Dorian Gray, that sort of thing, the more light reading. So Lee Child has not been read by me yet, but those novels, the Jack Reacher ones, are on my to-do list for next year.
Excellent. Are you going to start with book 1? Like, I think they adapted book 1 into season 1.
Yes, and I believe the jackhammer appears in, the first couple of pages, so I'm looking forward to that.
Excellent.
Eloise has no idea what we're talking about, but fans of Reacher will.
I'll read you the paragraph after we finish recording because it's amazing. You cannot leave here without hearing that.
Okay, we'll do that afterwards. My goals for next year are finish Moby Dick.
Yep.
4 and 40 so that I can finish my to read pile. One of my other things on my 40 before 40 list is to reduce social media usage, and so I want to replace that with reading. Like, I feel like we're all in sort of that same category where we just mindlessly scroll on our phones. I think everyone does it. It's a thing. And it makes me feel bad. I'm just like, what am I doing here? Just looking at nothing. And like, Facebook is just filled with nothing now. It's no one actually posting. It's just like algorithm stuff showing you a bunch of things that Facebook thinks you might want to see. And half the time I'm like, why is this in my feed? I don't want to see this. So I do want to replace that with actual reading next year. I used to read so much, especially before like I had kids, and I just want to be able to get back to that again. So that's my goal for next year.
So you're saying it's your kids' fault?
Yeah. remember we were talking about ignoring your family.
Ignore your family, read more.
Yep.
I don't advocate for that. We're all joking.
Yes. Joking.
Joking.
Well,
Brayton.
In terms of my goals, I've got so many books on my TBR list that's not an issue. But the thing I want to do is actually just make a dent in some ongoing series that I've been putting off for so long because
Discworld.
I'll get there. I will get there. Discworld, the Expanse series. I've got like 3 books sitting on my shelf in that series I haven't touched yet. I need to finish the Flamegate duology. I really want to finish off that one. What else? That's kind of my thing because I keep flicking back and forth between random books, and I just need to commit and actually just finish a series.
Yeah.
That's my goal. I've got so many books. I'm no shortage of books to read. And I'm sure I will buy more.
You're always posting to us about how, hey, look at this book I've just randomly bought. We're like, Brayton, come on. But all those other books.
It's content for the show.
It's true. Well, we've talked about our achievements and goals. I think that might be a good place to wrap up for now.
I feel like this might be an extra long episode just looking at the time, but
I'd have to edit it down a bit.
Nah, it's all good. Especially that 30 seconds where I was going, I couldn't remember the book title.
Yeah, edit that.
Which I'm
as long as you keep in my secondary rant about Great Gatsby, I'm satisfied with what you cut.
Well, I just realized I'm mentioning something that I'll probably edit out, so I'm probably going to have to edit this part out too.
Okay. Well, thanks once again for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. This will be the last podcast for the year, obviously, because there's only when we're recording, there's only 3 days left of the year. So
I'm hoping to have this out by New Year's.
Excellent. Well, Happy New Year, everyone. Safe travels, and we will see you again in
Happy
the new
year.
Happy New Year.
See you next year, everyone. I won't see you guys till next year.
Oh, no.
Oh.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.